never in my life have I ever met somebody who hates another person for no reason. Sinat chinam, senseless, causeless hatred. Has there ever been anybody who hates another person without a cause, which makes no sense? Chinam, for no reason. I always struggled with the famous expression that Chazal say in a number of places, the famous statement in Masechet Yuma Daf Tet, where they say that the second temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred, sinat chinam. Nobody ever hates somebody for no reason, even if the reasons aren't justified. They in their own mind have very good reason. I dislike that person because they did this to me. I hate that person because this is what happened. Everybody in their own mind has a reason. Nowhere in the world is there a person who says, you know what, I am a person of baseless hatred. I just dislike people. I dislike them. I hate them. It makes no sense. I've got no cause. In fact, I am the one, because of me, the temple was destroyed. Question number one, and really the essence of this entire shiur, I want to try and plummet the depths of the expression that we all know, baseless hatred. What is sinat chinam? What exactly was the sin that, according to our sages, caused the destruction of the second temple with this prolonged, terrible galut, which of course we've had wonderful over the last century, so much incredible returning to the land and to Yerushalayim and so many, and the world of Torah being built up in Israel, amazing things, but still Yerushalayim lies in ruins, the Temple Mount, we don't have the Beit HaMikdash rebuilt, and we're still suffering to a large extent because of that original sin. So really, what is sinat chinam? What does it mean? Why is it so bad? What is the exact sin? And what perhaps is the remedy? At the outset, I want to say that if we are fasting today on Tisha B'Av, and of course, the beginning of the 3 weeks, Yud Zayin B'Tammuz, the 3 weeks of mourning are punctuated in the beginning with the fast, at the end of the fast. If we are fasting today, mourning and fasting today, it is only because we ourselves, according to Chazal, still have what to rectify. The very sin which caused the destruction of the temple is the very sin which exists today. The Rambam makes this point abundantly clear in Hilchot Ta'anit Perek Hey, in the beginning of when he clarifies why it is we fast. Now we must distinguish, I just want to make one point clear. It is very important to distinguish between fasting and between mourning. In many ways, there are very different sentiments. A mourner is a person who is trying to come to terms with often irrevocable loss. They're coming to terms, learning to accept that which they cannot change. A person who is fasting is exactly the opposite. A person who sits in Ta'anit is, according to the Rambam and Chazal, is saying that they're sitting in Ta'anit as an act of teshuvah. The Nevi'im, Chazal say that when a person sits and fasts, they're doing that in order to change the situation, not to accept the situation. Fasting is the belief that through our actions, our piety, and everything that we do, we can change Ro'ag Zera. We can change this terrible reality. So yes, a mourner, and in fact mourners generally don't fast. A mourner, if a person's sitting shiva, we don't have a custom for people to fast. On the contrary, one eats in the shiva house. Mourners in general are not people whose predicament and focus is trying to change the situation. On the contrary, trying to accept it. So yes, so much of the mourning of Tisha B'Av and the mourning of the 3 weeks, this element of mourning is in order to come to terms with the shocking results of the destruction of the temple, which we still suffer from to a large extent today. But fasting is not coming to terms. It is acting in a way that we're trying to change, the exact opposite. We're trying to change that which it is we are mourning. And hence you have this built-in dichotomy, coming to terms with the results, mourning and fasting to change it. And this is what the Rambam says. I'm going to read it. He says, Yesh Yamim Shekol Yisrael, this is how he begins. The Rambam in Hilchot Ta'anit, I'm going to read it to you. He says, Yesh Yamim, there are days Shekol Yisrael mitanim bahem, that all Jews fast, Bipnat Sarot bahem, because of the fasts, the tzoros that happened to us, all of the tragedies. Kedei, and why is it that we fast? Kedei l'orer levavot, we fast in order to do teshuvah, to arouse ourselves, v'liftoach darkei teshuvah, and to open up the paths of teshuvah. And listen to what the Rambam says. This act of fasting, Zikaron, will remind us, Lema'aseinu haraim, u'ma'aseh avoteinu, it will remind us of our actions, our erroneous and incorrect actions, and as well as those of our forefathers, Shehaya kema'aseinu ata, shegaram lahem velanu, says the Rambam in absolute clarity. If we are fasting today, it's because we believe that it is our actions which continue to evoke the memory of the actions of our forefathers which caused the very same destruction. If we are fasting today, it's because the very cause, the reason for the destruction exists today, and it's for that reason that it has not been rebuilt. So first and foremost, when we fast today on Tisha B'Av, in this very difficult situation of mourning, we are not only coming to terms as mourners with this difficult reality of Tisha B'Av today and Yerushalayim and the Temple Mount today, but we are in so many ways fasting in order to change it, in order to revisit that which caused the destruction and see what it is we can do about it. What can we do about it? There is no way of understanding how we can change and how we can reverse the rags thereof after so many years without understanding the diagnosis. In order to cure the patient, one has to understand the diagnosis. What is the diagnosis? What exactly is wrong? And if we know exactly what the problem is, we can diagnose it and define it. We have a chance at least of curing it. We all know that an excellent question is so much of the answer. If you know what the issue is, that already helps you clarify what it is you need to do about it. And certainly when there's malaise, when there is sickness, when there is physical or spiritual challenge, if you know what it is that causes it, then you know what it is that may cure it. So we know that it's sinat chinam. There are many different sins given, but the most salient and famous is sinat chinam. And I want to return to the very source, the source that we all know, because in reading the source of what is sinat chinam, what it stands for and what it means, I believe we will come to, through this context, an incredible, sharp, amazing insight, which is explained further by the great Rosh Yeshiva Volozhin, the Netziv, based on this Talmudic context. So what is sinat chinam and how does it work? Let us go to the source that we all know. The Talmud in Masechet Yuma Daf Tet says as follows: Aval Mikdash Sheni. Why was the second temple destroyed? What is the reason, as we all know? But here is the difficult part. Shayu oskim b'Torah, as opposed to the first temple when it was destroyed. People were not learning Torah. In the second temple, they were learning Torah. Uba mitzvot, and they were keeping and fulfilling the mitzvot. Ugmilut chasadim, and they were doing acts of loving kindness. Mipnei ma charev. Why was it destroyed? Mipnei shaitabo sinat chinam, the famous expression, because there was at the time amongst the people sinat chinam. Difficult. What exactly is sinat chinam? As we says, hatred for no reason, baseless causes hatred. Lelameidcha, and here's such a powerful thing to teach you. Just understand how diabolical this sin, whatever it means, this type of hatred, whatever it means. Look how diabolical it is. Lelameidcha, to teach you. Sheshkulat sinat chinam keneged shalosh averot. It is so bad that it is equal to the totality of the three worst sins that are just to govern one's life and not to transgress. And what are they? Of course, as we know, avodah zarah, gilui arayot, shvichut damim. The same three terrible sins that all three caused the destruction of the first temple are equal to the one terrible sin of sinat chinam: murder, incest, and idolatry and adultery. Meaning adultery, anything related to immoral acts, not necessarily incest, any immoral act when it comes to the realm of sexuality. Right? Adultery, Rahman al-Islam, murder, and avodah zarah, idolatry. All three things, each one has to give up one's life rather than to transgress, as we all know the Gemara, which clarifies this. As bad as all three, sinat chinam. Remarkable. Whatever the sin is, it is so bad that it alone is enough to cause the destruction of the temple. But it's far more than that. I want to quote you the incredible, remarkable words. We wouldn't be able to say them if not for the words of the Sefer HaCharedim. Sefer HaCharedim was written by 450 years ago by Rabbi Elazar Zikri, the author of the Yedid Nefesh. He was one of the great Kabbalists of Tzfat, and in the whole Chabura of the Arizal. And Rabbi Elazar Zikri wrote beautiful poems as well that we bring in Shabbat today. Who doesn't bring in Shabbat today with Yedid Nefesh and take out Shabbat with Yedid Nefesh at the Sudah Shlishit? The great Rabbi Elazar Zikri wrote a book called Sefer HaCharedim, which clarifies the different elements of the 613 mitzvot, the mitzvot aseh and lo ta'aseh. And in Sefer HaCharedim, when it comes to hatred, lo tisnai et achicha, I want to read to you what he says. He says regarding Sinat Chinam, this comes from Sefer Harim, Perek Samach Vav 66. But Sinat Chinam tiv, regarding this baseless hatred, it says, Lo tisnai achicha bilvavecha. The Torah says, do not hate somebody, our fellow Jew in our heart. And listen to what he says, Vehi shoresh kol haraot. If you want to know what the root source of all bad in the world is, you need to know the root of all of it is this hatred in the heart. And what is this hatred in the heart? Sinat Chinam. And look what he says. Ra'ei ma shegarma sinat Yosef la'achav. Look at what caused the original galut. If you go back to the original galut, which caused Joseph, and therefore his brothers, and therefore Yaakov, to go for hundreds of years of galut, exile and slavery in Egypt, what caused it? The hatred that Yosef evoked within his brothers, which ended up being in the end Sinat Chinam. That caused the very first galut. And just like that caused the first galut, so too this causes the last galut, the galut that we are suffering today. Val sinat chinam anu begalut ha'aroch hazeh mikol hagaluyot shayu b'sibat avodat elilim. He says, the galut that we have today for almost 2,000 years of Yerushalayim, and again, even though there's been incredible return, millions of Jews returning, 6.7 million Jews living in Israel. We have never had numbers like this in the history of the Jewish people. I saw a demographer writing that the maximum perhaps of Jews who ever lived in Israel in the time of David and Shlomo was 5 million. There are more Jews living today between the Mediterranean and the Jordan, between the Galil and Eilat, in the borders, the precincts of Eretz Yisrael than there have ever been in the history of the world. And there are more Jews living in Yerushalayim and more human beings. There's 900,000 people live in Yerushalayim. 500,000 Jews and more living in Yerushalayim. There have never been such numbers. So yes, there's been a return. And yes, in so many ways. But Yerushalayim, Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount, Beit HaMikdash, we still don't have. And we still suffer in so many ways because of this. And this long Aruch Galut, says the Sefer Haredim, is because of Sinat Chinam. So look how bad it is. Meaning we suffered more from this sin more than we suffered from the sins of idolatry, adultery and murder. Because the Galut is longer. It is more diabolical. It's also the original sin of the Galut. The first Galut of the Jewish people comes back to Sinat Chinam. And however you look at it, this is the problem. There is no way of escaping it. Sinat Chinam. But what is this Sinat Chinam? What is this baseless hatred that is the root of all evil? Causes the longest galut. What is it? And here we have to look very carefully at the wording of the Gemara itself. And we will see how the Netziv Volozhin, in his introduction to Ha'amek Davar, his incredible commentary on the Torah, makes this point very clearly. Let's look at something we perhaps overlooked, which cannot be overlooked because it's the key to the entire sugya. What does the Talmud say? The people who were stricken with Sinat Chinam, the very generation that caused the destruction of the temple, incredibly had three qualities that they were defined by. So difficult to understand. That same generation, Hayu Oskim BaTorah, they studied Torah, they occupied themselves with Torah. Uba mitzvot, and they fulfilled mitzvot. Gemilut Chasadim, and they even did acts of chesed. I don't understand. How can it be that it says that generation of Sinat Chinam was the same to which learned Torah? How can people learn Torah and steep themselves in Hashem's values and still have Sinat and hate people? How does that work? How can people keep the mitzvot, where so many of the mitzvot talk about all the acts of sensitivity to other people? So much of the Torah is sensitivity to others, and yet those same people could hate others. How do you learn Torah and hate? How do you occupy yourself with Torah and hate? How do you fulfill mitzvot and hate? It's an oxymoron. It doesn't go together. Tartei satre. And even if somehow we can get our head around that, how do you get our head around the following? That there were people who were defined by Gemilut Chasadim. They did chesed. It says it explicitly. Gemilut Chasadim. Those same people who occupied with Torah, kept mitzvot, and did chesed to each other, were defined by those qualities. Can hate other people? How does it work? What is this enigmatic, mysterious Sinat Chinam that somehow takes root in the heart, becomes the root of all evil, even if one can be studying Torah, keeping mitzvot, and even doing chesed? The Netziv says, I have an answer. And I have to say, I would never say such a thing, could never imagine such a thing, had it not been the Netziv, the great Rosh Yeshiva Volozhin, who says it explicitly in his commentary on the Torah, in his introduction to the whole book of Bereshit, he says as follows. You see, and here's the chidush. The people that were being hated, the object of people's hate, were not the same people that they were doing chesed to. People were incredible at chesed, but to who? To people that they considered who were not apikorsim and heretics. You see in halacha, in fact, there is even dispensation in the Gemara, in Perek Chelek. The Rambam codifies and mentions, yes, there are people who are considered absolute heretics, enemies to everything that the Torah stands for. Heretics and apikorsim. That there may even be a dispensation to harbor feelings of hate. That may be the exception. But what was the sin? Anybody and everybody who was different from me, who was not part of my circle of influence, who were not part of my community, however I defined it, they were chashdu b'hem, says the Netziv. I'll read his words. He says, V'alkein mipnei sinat chinam shaya belibam, chashdu ze et ze, each one suspected the other. Those who behave differently in the ways of Hashem, others might have been following the ways of Hashem, but it seemed that how they were serving God was so different from my way. In fact, the way they're serving God, even though they're serving God, seems to be, we suspect that they're actually apikorsim and heretics. Incredible. Anyone who's not like me, anyone who's not following my community mores and the way we understand halacha and how we believe the way to live is, in that generation, was suspected of being an apikoros and a heretic. There was a definition that you may perhaps be able to hate the actions or maybe even the people themselves for their acts of enmity against Hashem and the Torah. Yes, there may be such a definition, but people so quickly put everybody who wasn't like that in that environment. And therefore, yes, if you're part of my community, if you're part of my circle of influence, boy oh boy, did I treat you with respect. I would study with you, I would engage in mitzvot, I would even do chesed. They might have even had gmachim and of gmilut chesed to look after their people, to look after the people of their community. The acts of chesed may have been remarkable, with one proviso: were you part of my community? Were you part of my ideology? Because if you were, boy oh boy, did I treat you like you had never been treated. But if you were not, chashdu bahem, they were suspected, says the Netziv, as if they were tziduki and apikor. Everyone was a Sadducee. Everyone was an apikoros. Everybody was very quickly put into these categories, which were beyond the pale. Remarkable. The truth is that this description of the Netziv, which I want to come back to, is exactly accurate from a historic point of view from a number of different sources. Firstly, Josephus, Yosef ben Matityahu, his remarkable story of this Jewish general, observant Jewish general, who eventually, when his city fell, in the north, in the Galilee, eventually was taken prisoner by the Romans, and eventually, as we know, became the historian of the Romans. He was a very talented man, an intellectual, and a leader, and eventually he became, in order to save himself, coming behind the Roman legions as they came to Jerusalem, who would chronicle what happened, and writing the book, of course, The War of the Jews, Yosef Flavius. And in this, Josephus writes in a number of places an incredible thing. I want to read you two quotes. Josephus, in a number of places, says as follows. He says that when the Roman general, when Vespasian, Aspasianus, came to Jerusalem in the initial stages of the siege and came to destroy the city, he almost had nothing to do. You see, at the time, the Jews were fighting against each other, ourselves. There were so many different groups. There were, of course, the Tzidukim. There were the Prushim. There were Asiatim, the Butim, the Sikari, the Kanaim. There were so many different groups. And within these factions within factions. And so quickly, everybody was very quick to say, if you're not part of my faction, within the faction, then you're outside of the pale. And I want to read to you what incredible. This is from the War of the Jews by Josephus Flavius in Book 4, Chapter 6. He says, Vespasian says to his soldiers, you are wrong. We don't have a big battle against these Jews. Yes, the Merodach and all these Jews rebelled. But he says in the end, do you know what will be their downfall? It's incredible. They will destroy themselves. He says they will be consumed in their own sedition. He said, God is on our side. God acts as a general of the Romans, and he will do better than we can do, granting our army a victory over theirs, while their enemies is destroying each other with their own hands and falling into the great misfortune. to sit, and all we need to do is sit still as spectators of the danger they run into, rather than fight hand-to-hand combat. He says, we don't need to fight hand-to-hand combat. Sit back and let them destroy each other, which indeed, as the Gemara, Masechet Gittin, the Gemara describes, the Talmud describes how this infighting, burning, as we know, as the Kanaim did. What did they do? There was so many supplies that the Jews had stored for years in the great storehouses of the wealthy men of Jerusalem, who had given so much to the storehouses to be able to withstand years of siege. And they were burnt by the Kanaim. They were burnt. That we must fight until the end. If it was not for the infighting, somehow this hatred one for the other, perhaps would have been able to stand up to the Romans. And also I saw a quote from the caves of Qumran, where we know there were different Jewish sects in the caves of Qumran, and there in the findings of the cave of Qumran is written explicitly by text of one of the sects saying that they describe themselves as the sons of light and all the other sects as the sons of darkness. There you have it. Those who are like us, part of our sect, part of our way of serving God, however we see it to be fit, they are blessed with light. They are blessed with redemption. They are blessed with God's grace, and we will treat them as part of our fraternity and community within this acts of commitment, of loyalty, of chesed. But if they are not, they are in the dark. They are the apikursim. They are the enemies. And here we have it, ladies and gentlemen. We see how quickly we are able, through ideological differences, to create this environment that those of us who are on our side are part of redemption, are part of God's grace, deserve every bit of chesed that we have. And those who are outside, we judge them harshly. Any doubt we may have that they're heretic nabies, we attribute to them the worst of motives and say that they are part of the sons of dark. And as such, outside of God's grace and God's influence. This is sinat chinam. We started this talk by saying that who's ever met somebody who hates another person for no reason? What is sinat chinam, baseless hatred? It seems to be this. Of course, you have a reason to hate somebody else. But the reason to demonize another person, to consider them to be an apikoros, is baseless. There is absolutely no justification, baseless and causeless, to attribute to the actions and behavior of others as if all those who are not like you are heretics and apikorosim. That is baseless. To delegitimize other Jews, to delegitimize even those who are serving, as the Netziv says, Birat Hashem. People are serving God, and you acknowledge, yes, they're on a path of Yirat Hashem. It's just that they've missed the point and they're heretics. To delegitimize another, known in English, Latin, ad hominem attacks. To say that we don't, as we say in sport, you don't play the ball, you play the man, you play the player. We're no longer about discourse, but you attack the person and delegitimize their derech and everything that they stand for. I'm so amazed in life how reasonable discourse, I'm going to use a few D's over here to make the point. How does reasonable discourse become discussion, become debate, become dispute, become division, become delegitimization, and ultimately, the worst of all, demonization? How do we go from civil debate, discussion, and machloket l'shem shamayim to the fact that we are able to delegitimize and demonize the very raison d'etre, the very derech of somebody else? This is sinat chinam. We have to be so careful to make the distinction, the critical distinction, that even if we have an issue with others, and even if we are unable to come to terms with the views of others, the ideologies of others, the derech of others, yes, we should argue, we should debate, we should vehemently argue. But the moment we delegitimize anyone and everyone who holds that view, and the moment we demonize them to the extent that so quickly those who are not exactly like us are on some level outside of the fold of what true Yirat Shamayim is and the true Derech Hashem is very, very dangerous. When we do this, when we go from debate to dispute, to divisiveness, to delegitimization and demonization, when we do that, we dance ever so closely to the abyss of sinat chinam. That is our challenge if we want to be metaken, if we want to change this generation. And that was the original sin, so to speak, of the galut, the original sin that caused the galut of the Jewish people, of this enmity between Yehuda and the brothers and between Yosef, reaching the conclusion we don't have time to go into the sugya, but at the end of the day, Yosef's action evoked such hatred within his brothers. It says more than anyone else, Vayisnoto, it says 3-4 times that Joseph's actions of Hotzi dibatam ra'el avihem, he was not faultless. He used to tittle-tale, so to speak, he used to bring the actions of his brothers dibatam ra'el avihem, and he was also evoked their very negative feelings, but so quickly their legitimate gripes that they had with their brother, the legitimate disputes that they had with him. Rav Soloveitchik famously explains in his Chamesh Drashot how the debates between Yehuda and the brothers and Yosef were ideological debates. There were very deep debates. Perhaps Yosef was dreaming, as we know, of astrology, of the stars, of the sheaves of corn, says Rav Soloveitchik, of astrology, of the ways of God, of history, of philosophy, of the mysterious ways of God, of agriculture, of economy, of how to change the world perhaps through embracing history and astrology and God's involvement in the world. And Yehuda and his brothers being more conservative and saying, no, why is Joseph meddling in God's affairs? Huge, big ideological debates, ad kedei kach that the Beit Din of Yehuda reached the conclusion, that they could reach the conclusion that his derech, Avodat Hashem, was outside of the fold. Not that we dislike his views, not that we have major gripes, not that we even have personal issues perhaps with our father's favoritism, but to reach the conclusion of sinat chinam, that our reason for dispute and division with our brother is such that we can delegitimize, demonize, and deem him to his death, to send him to Egypt, boggles the mind. And I want to end and say the following. Every single year, the month of Av, we commemorate the only yahrzeit which is mentioned explicitly in the Torah. In Parshat Masai that we read around this time. In Parshat Masai it says that the day of the death of Aaron was on the first day of the 5th month. Rosh Chodesh Av was the day of the passing of Aaron, perhaps to give us a legacy for generations. That as we go into Mishenichnas Av Mamatim B'Simcha, as we go into the difficult month of Av, which ultimately the original sin, so to speak, of the Galut, and certainly also the death of the sin of the spies, also at the time of Tishba, which caused extended and protracted Galut in the desert and not going into the land, and the 2,000-year Galut, somehow all coming back to this principle of Sinat Chinam. Who do we have? Who is the shining example of what we need to do, perhaps to remedy this? Aharon HaKohen. Aharon HaKohen she'ohev shalom v'rodev shalom. Aharon HaKohen, as the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says, that he would, more than anybody, we should be like Talmidim of Aaron, who everything they do is to be peacemakers, to find ways of judging favorably, to find ways of attributing to people positive intentions and positive actions, the opposite, not attributing to others who are different to be apikursim and otherwise, but exactly the opposite, to judging others favorably, to going out of our ways, what Rabbi Natan says that Aaron would do, to bring people together, to put personal disputes aside, to put disputes in the family, within the people. And may we all, Bezrat Hashem, evoke and revoke the memory of Aharon HaKohen, and in our actions, look very carefully at ourselves, not look at others, but look at ourselves. How can we free ourselves ever so more of Sinat Chinam? As Rav Kook famously said, to fill ourselves with Ahavat Chinam, to go out of our way, to attribute to other people the best of intentions. And if we are able to find every way to legitimize others, not to demonize others, to have fair and sharp debate, while at the same time judging others favorably and bringing hearts together, we'll be that much closer to Ahavat Chinam and to rebuilding Yerushalayim that we all daven for, Bimheira v'yameinu.